Well, hello again, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the AMA podcast. My name is Matt Ruddick, your host as always. Thank you so much for downloading this week's episode. Man, coming up today, this is an interview I've been looking forward to for some time now. As I've mentioned before on this show, I'm a huge fan of tiny drones, and today my guest is someone I think we can credit for making tiny FPV drones one of the most exciting, one of the most fun, one of the most accessible disciplines in model aviation. And I can't be happier to have him on the show with us today. Founder and creator of the Tiny Whoop, Jesse Perkins, joins us on the AMA podcast. Jesse, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hey, Matt. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. It's good to be here.
So, Jesse, I like to start every show off or every interview with my guests and finding out how they got started in RC, kind of what their origin story is in the world of RC flight. And I want to start that with you. How did you get started in RC?
Sure. I think like a lot of people, I got into it with the help of my family a little bit. I mean, my dad bought me my first quadcopter, which back in 2014, I think, the end of 2014, was a little tiny drone about this big. I still have it framed, but it's called the Proto X. You remember that one?
I do. I absolutely
Little
do.
tiny drone. And I think it was designed to break pretty much right away, but it was stable for its first few flights, you know, and then you learned, yeah. So I just started crashing tons and tons of those and buying more. I went through 10 of them, and then I used the old bodies to charge more batteries so I could fly a lot. But it didn't take me long to start buying the next bigger one. I got into some blades, some Horizon Hobby products, you know, and finally met somebody in a park who saw me flying this toy grade thing and said, "Have you thought about trying hobby grade?" And I didn't even know what they were talking about. I wasn't even really aware of high-powered mini quads yet. And yeah, that's really what got me into it, was my dad making this gift of an early quadcopter that I just thought was so cool.
So from there, because obviously one of the things that that you were known for before Tiny Whoop became a thing was you were flying 5-inch racing drones with something called Team Big Whoop, and we'll get into how that name kind of evolved into what you do now. But how did that team kind of come to formation for you?
Sure. Well, yeah, that guy I mentioned that spotted me on campus flying around one of my toy drones, just line of sight, just for fun. I was just having a bad day. I went to campus and started flying my drone around like a lot of people do when they're having a bad day. I think that's still a common motif, especially nowadays, just to go fly. Always makes you feel better.
Absolutely.
And I was flying there, and one of the guys that came up to me and was really interested, he was trying to hire me to be a pilot for his drone business, but he also got me involved in we founded what became the Fort Collins Drone Enthusiasts. I'm from Fort Collins, Colorado, where I am right now. And the Fort Collins Drone Enthusiasts brought together anybody in our city that wanted to think about drones or fly drones, or we got a lot of phantom pilots that showed up and just a couple racing pilots. But some of the racing pilots that showed up were Chris Fisher and Jordan Temkin, and they became the two other founding members of Team Big Whoop. Right after we all started flying together, Drone Nationals 2015 was announced. Do you remember that one?
I do. I was out in California, right?
Yeah, in Sacramento. They offered 100 slots, and we all got our slots on to compete at Drone Nationals 2015 at the World's Fair in Sacramento. I think it was the World's Fair. And we were all flying the design created by Chris Fisher called the XBR, which stood for the Xbox Racer. It was a 220 size frame. I've got one right outside this room, but 220 size frame that we were running 6-inch propellers on. And it was one of the first true X frames. It was shaped like a square. And back then, a lot of the popular frames were H frames, like the Blackout or the QAV, whatever. All the Blackout knockoffs. And that was really popular. But we were flying these true X frames with all the weight held right in the middle. And we thought it was just so innovative. So we all started building tons of these to go to Drone Nationals 2015, me, Jordan, and Chris. And everybody going, it seemed like there was all these big teams that were going to show up there. All the people that we were watching online were definitely going to be at Drone Nationals 2015. And by then, we were all super fans of these people. but we were nobody. It's crazy to think even Jordan Temkin was completely unknown to the entire world at this point. And
an amazing
just showed
thought
up
to have right now, really.
I know.
That Jordan Temkin is an unknown person.
Probably the most famous drone pilot, the most accomplished drone racing pilot in the world right now, was unknown to everybody and was a founding member of Team Big Whoop. And he was actually our builder. We brought him onto the team as the guy who was going to build a lot of quads for us. And we all built all our quads. But we wanted a team name that made a point, not about our skill, but to make fun of our skill. Because we were like, look at all these guys. They're going out there. Everybody going to this event is a big whoop except us. We're just these nobodies coming from Colorado. Let's call ourselves Team Big Whoop. It was actually Chris Fisher's idea. And I don't think anybody even knew our team name the whole time we were out there. But then we started going to all kinds of events around the world, around the country, and then around the world as Team Big Whoop, including Multi-GP Nationals 2015, where I'm proud to say I seeded second and then it got knocked down to 7th place. But while we were there, we stickered everybody and everything with our famous Team Big Whoop stickers. It was really the birth of the sticker movement. And, we're sneaking around and sneaking up behind all these celebrities and putting stickers on their backs and putting stickers on the inside of every trash can and putting stickers on every poster. And, Team Big Whoop, we got away with it because Team Big Whoop is not a brand. It's not a company. It's not, it's nothing but promoting Team Big Whoop itself, which I still pretty much consider to be the first true team. Back then there was some promotional teams like Lumineer and there was a few other teams that were associated with companies, but we were a true brotherhood, a true team of pilots traveling the country and then the world without selling anything or trying to take advantage of anything. We were completely against all sponsorships. We completely rejected sponsorships because after we went to Drone Nationals 2015, we learned right away, like I made friends with Cody Matson, McKenna McClure, a handful of pilots that are still around today and still making waves in the FPV community. And the thing that I took away from making a whole bunch of friends at Drone Nationals 2015 in Sacramento was that sponsorships were bad for what I considered to be the spirit of the hobby. And I don't think I necessarily feel like that now. I can tell you about the Tiny Whip sponsorship program, which is a mockery of all other sponsorships. But lots of pilots on Team Big Whoop now are sponsored, and we do that in a way that everybody is happy about, including me. But back then, our whole thing was fly anything you want, fly any equipment you want. The whole goal is to move the sport forward and innovate and have fun. And when you see pilots that have these awesome sponsorships that I was envious of, but now I'm meeting them and I realize they love my little tiny Xbox racer. They love that I can innovate and build anything I want. And I wanted to hold on to that as tight as I could. So initially Team Big Whoop was anti-sponsorship, but that led to heavy promotion. I think that the promotion was born from the anti-sponsorship sort of sentiment in our group. So we just started promoting the heck out of it, and everybody wanted to know what Big Whoop was, because it's just a little square that says Big Whoop. And the answer was pretty much nothing, just some friends having fun. That led to a few parody stickers. There was, we made some parody stickers of the Team Big Whoop sticker just to joke about the original phenomenon. We have one that says make in the top tiny words, it says making, and then Big Whoopee. Which, if you just look at it for a second, it just looks like another Big Whoop sticker.
Yeah.
And then we made one sticker that was a little teeny tiny square, about a centimeter square, and it said Tiny Whoop. And it was a joke about the Big Whoop stickers. And that sticker I started putting everywhere and all over people and people's sunglasses. And, it was all over the original Phoenix Cup, which was 2016 down in Phoenix, Arizona. And that's where the first Tiny Whoop sticker happened. But Tiny Whoop itself wasn't going to be born for a while from there. It just adopted the name of the parody sticker when it became what's now Tiny Whoop.
Yeah, it's you guys, I think, may have been the first viral movement in drones in the hobby, really. I mean, you created this whether you intended to or not, created this kind of this marketing viral marketing phenomenon with these stickers, and it still goes on today. I can still go to the International Air Modeling Center at an event, and there'll be a trash can that's pulled out for that flying site or whatever, and oh look, there's a Tiny Whip sticker on the side, or a Big Whip sticker or whatever. It's funny to see that.
Or all kinds of other stickers now too. I mean,
absolutely,
the sticker culture and secret stickering. And I want to give everybody who's out there who's a fan of sticker culture, I want to give everybody a lesson on how to do it at some point in this interview, if you don't mind. Because I'm a famous sticker ninja, and I'm here to pass on the secrets to encourage the sticker culture. But yeah, a lot of events, Gravity Goons down in Florida was another one that early on saw the Team Big Whoop sticker and wanted to run with it, wanted to promote their brand in a strong way just like that. And I love that because they're not, they were a completely, I'm sure they still are, completely pure enterprise, just a team of friends, proud of their skill, proud of where they're from, and proud of, what brought them together to become big players in the FPV world. And sticker culture is still going strong. It's an important part of the big events now, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Last year at the International Open, I was sitting on I was sitting just in front of the pilots area during the final night of racing, and I was sitting there, and I think I was sitting next to Tim Barnhart maybe, and we were taking pictures. And Jordan Temkin came walking around, and I saw he had a sheet of stickers, so I knew what he was doing.
Yep.
And I kind of flagged him over. I said, "Hey, Jack, come here." He came over, and I said, "Hit my lens, man." So he took a big sticker and stuck it on the front on the lens hood, or
that is an honor.
Lens shade of my lens. So it's still there.
Wow.
Every time I pull that lens out, and I use that lens a lot, I present that with honor, having that Big Whoop sticker on there.
That is so cool. I mean, yeah, there's a few other important things I've gotten to sticker. Like, first of all, the lens of the photographer of the AMA is a really big one. But everybody's trying to get their stickers on Chris Thomas's Bullhorn. That's another famous sticker location. I have my own Bullhorn that's now attracted a lot of beautiful stickers from around the world. We have a sticker sort of shrine at Tiny Whip headquarters. I'm at home right now because I'm staying away from, still working from home for the most part. But we have a fake fireplace that's always burning at Tiny Whip headquarters, and it's just covered in stickers from around the world because people send us stickers, and we send stickers back. But yeah.
Yeah, it's just an amazing. It really shows that you guys are all about having fun, and I think that's the most important takeaway. We unfortunately just a couple of weeks ago lost Bob Brown, who's a former AMA president, and one of the things, he's a big proponent of FPV, but he was also a big proponent of having fun. That was one of the things he preached to us all the time, and one of the things that I loved about Bob was that he was so dedicated to having fun. And what you guys do, between the stickering, you mentioned earlier the sponsorship contract that you guys have. I encourage folks to go read that. It's on your website. It is a hilarious read. And first time I read that, I loved it, and I was like, yeah, this is totally it. But that's what you guys are about, are having fun, and there's a part of that I want to talk to you a little bit about later, about how it makes it all kind of inviting for novice pilots. But before we get to that, I want to jump back into how Tiny Whoop kind of became a brand, and became not even a brand, became a thing to do. Sure. Eventually, there was something called a drone house that came to
exactly. That's what I was going to say.
I'd love to hear that story.
Yeah, well, 2015, I mentioned that we went to Sacramento, and that's where we made a ton of friends that I'm proud to still keep today. Lots of the original gangsters were over there at the Sacramento Drone Nationals 2015. But then there was a handful of really important races in Las Vegas, like the Las Vegas Underground was a big one, the first parking garage race that was underneath Fremont Street. Mm-hmm. Then we did one several in Las Vegas by Harrison Gale called XDC. Those were huge races that helped define the culture of mini quad. And, the Phoenix Cup, races all over the country. And when they would happen, there was always a handful of pilots that wanted to stay together at an Airbnb. So Team Big Whoop started setting up these Airbnbs, and Zach Thayer became a member of Team Big Whoop pretty early, and he started heading up a bunch of these drone houses by getting an Airbnb and then going through the painstaking process of inviting all of these cool people, making arrangements with them, paying for everything, and then wrangling all the money from all these 15 or 20 pilots that would stay at the drone house, which I did once, but he did a few times, and a few other guys on Team Big Wheel helped out too. But what happened at Drone House was, first of all, a ton of friendships were born at these 5 or 6 drone houses that took place around the country. And in addition to that, we had a blast, hanging out. We were partying together in the evenings and having a great time, fellowshipping and whatnot. But we ended up flying micros around the house. And in the first drone house, which was in Las Vegas, I was the only one there with a micro, and it was a Phoenix PFG 110, Phoenix Flight Gear 110. I don't have it here, but it's about this big, and it's a tiny little H-frame. And back then we had the camera was called the VA 1100, which was by Spectrum Horizon Hobby. And it was the first micro FPV combo, was $100. I went through 10 of them. I dropped $1,000 on those things eventually. But
and it kind of was like flying through a potato. If I'm
yeah, it had really narrow field of view. So you could just see straight in front of you and nothing else. You had no idea what was going on. It was so hard to get used to, but definitely enough to give you the gift of tiny flight that we all fell in love with. And we were just passing this thing around and terrorizing each other. And if you watch, there is a video on my personal channel. Maybe I'll send it to you later if you want to link it. It's not, I'm not trying to promote it, but it's 2016 flying this really slow. You can tell how hard it is to fly by watching the video. And all I'm doing is terrorizing all these famous pilots like Jordan and Bapu and Chase and all the famous 15 or so pilots. They're now famous, but back then we're just kind of a bunch of bros. And this is not prop guarded. This is not ducted. So it's maybe a prop about maybe 1.5 inch bi-blade swinging.
I'm assuming little brush motors.
Yeah, brush motors. Yeah. And swinging a little bi-blade that actually did scare everybody. And that's what you pretty much see in this video is people like holding pillows up for shields and trying to dodge it. And Jordan just getting furious at me because he was always my main target, since way before Tiny Whoop. He was the guy I was trying to face punch back before face punching was a thing with Tiny Whoop. But yeah, Drone House. And then eventually my friend Christian Avedon, another one of the 7 members now on Team Big Whoop, was the first person to ever put a FPV camera on an Inductrix. And then another gentleman, innovator by the name of Ori Pomoni, was the first person to upgrade the motors on that Inductrix with a little FPV camera. And since then, that really, I fell in love with that. And a lot of people talk about how Tiny Whoop is wonderful because it's super accessible, because it's very safe is another really good reason. But for me, what I really latched onto was sort of the whimsy and the magic of just being this little tiny thing in a world that is suddenly way bigger. I have a small place here, but it is a vast terrain when I have a Tiny Whoop. And the, what maybe one thing that makes the world feel so big is these wider lenses that we're using now. It seems like when you get behind a tiny wide lens, you're just like, whoa, it's huge in here, But yeah, it was enough for me in those early days to really latch on to the magic of being a tiny flying thing, or a tiny anything really. And since then, the camera's obviously changed many times. The flight controller has changed many times. The frame, the motors, the battery, the pigtail, the props many times. Every single component has been innovated because the community has grown so fast, and the community is packed with hardcore, fun-loving interviewers who understand the magic of being a tiny first-person view flying vehicle. And so Tiny Whoop was born, I made this channel that used Ben Shepherd's really cool music back in the day. I started as a YouTube channel. A whole bunch of people said, please just make a store so that we can make these parts accessible. My dad really encouraged me. My good friend Mark helped me get things started. It became a retail store. And, the retail store is still, it's what I do full time now, but nobody in the world is passionate about operating a retail store. I still stay really focused. It's not fun, but I still stay focused on the fun of flight. And I feel so lucky that I get to fly as much as I do. I feel like one of the luckiest guys in the world.
Well, so at the time, you mentioned, Christian added the camera. You had some other folks adding, upgrading the motors and whatnot. Mm-hmm. Those parts were not really available widely.
No.
I mean, to upgrade the motors that are going to be the same size to be able to fit inside of that Inductrix frame, I'm sure that wasn't an easy thing to find.
It wasn't. There was one man, Benedict Hawk in Australia, who made these motors available. And once Tiny Whoop caught on, and so at the time we just made a recipe and we released the recipe freely and said, everybody, just please go out and make a Tiny Whoop. They're easy to do because they are way easier than building a mini quad. You're pretty much just plugging stuff in, a tiny amount of soldering. And we offered out this recipe, and on that recipe was brushless motors that were 14,000 kV, 6 millimeters by 15 millimeter motors. And we sent everybody.
You said brushless. You mean brushed?
Oh, I meant to say brushed. Thank you. Okay. Brushed motors and 6 millimeters by 15. And we sent everybody to micromotorwarehouse.com. Which was where the only place you could get some of these parts back then. And Benedict sold all sizes of brush motors and was hardcore encouraging innovation just by the way he talked to people. Benedict has this way of talking that says to you, if you're a nerd, I'm a nerd too, and let's nerd out together. Benedict has this intense, awesome charisma that had a huge influence on what became Tiny Whoop culture. But back then, he got a flood of people that went to his website and ordered all of these 14,000 kV 6x15 brushed motors until they were out. And there was a 3-month period in 2015 called, I think they called it Whoopageddon, or it must have been called Whoopageddon or something. How come I can't remember now? But there was this 3-month period where nobody could get the motor that everybody wanted. And during that time, a whole bunch of other businesses and people that are in the community trying to make money in the community took notice, and it started to really snowball during the gigantic brushed motor shortage of 2015 to early 2016. During that winter was when it's really started to grab onto the community. The recipe got really popular. People started to buy it. There was a few events where there was gigantic shortages. We still experience big shortages because of the way trends change. And, even though the entire aircraft, here's one right here, that it's been completely redesigned and almost every part on here is made specifically for Tiny Whoop flight now. There's still a ton of innovating left to do. And every one of these little parts on this thing right here, this is cutting edge, top of the line, but there's still a lot of room for improvement. So we're still seeing tons and tons of innovation, mostly from the community, but a lot of times also from businesses that are involved.
Yeah, it's amazing to watch how quickly the technology has changed. You're talking about 14,000 kV brushed motors. To me, like if someone were to say, here's some 14,000 kV brushed motors for a Tiny Whoop, I'd be like, I'm good. That's super slow. Why would I want that right now?
Yeah,
it's amazing how quickly that changed.
Yep. And the idea of what was the idea of a 14,000 kV or a brushed motor that is 6 millimeters by 15 that's faster than 14,000, there was a time when that would have been a bad idea. Benedict named his 19,000 kV brushed motors insane, I think. Mm-hmm. And pretty much marketed them as bottle rockets that are going to eventually explode.
Because at the time, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there was you were kind of limited by the flight controller that we were using. Mm-hmm. You weren't able to go beyond that without introducing a lot of vibration and a lot of issues.
that was an issue, but even when we had other flight controllers, brushed motors were not seen as safe, or at least long lasting. And it's still pretty much true. Really fast brush motors don't last forever. There's something like a 4-hour flight time total on brush motors. That's how it's always been. And when you get faster, 19,000, now you can find 25,000, rumors of 25,500 kV motors. And they're fast. They're too fast. There is a such thing as too fast, and everybody learned that early on. But yeah, the idea that there could be faster motors seemed ludicrous. It seemed like physically impossible. Like the physics didn't work out was the thought back then. But now, like you said, it's gone so much farther past that. And a lot of these are using brushless motors like this one, but brushed is still really relevant. And there's still new brushed motors that are coming out and that are wonderful to think about and fly.
I personally, so I've got both brushed and brushless micro drones, some tiny, some other brands. And I still think there's a place for brushed. I love my brushless setups. But man, I still really like my brushed ones too, especially indoor. Indoor, I'm less apt to have to run like a throttle limiter on my radio and things like that. And even something else. Back in February, I competed over at the Dayton Air Force Museum, the race they had over there, and somebody who's no slacker when it comes to racing, Paul Nurkola, competed with a brushed quad. So there is still room for brushed stuff out there, but the brushless stuff now, you can take them outside, you can run them around your yard, and I've done it a couple times, and it's so much fun.
There's a lot of different styles of tiny whooping. Racing is just one of them, but yeah, you're right. Even in racing, brushed is completely relevant depending on the course. Freestyle, a lot of that's brushless now, but there are still brushed freestylers too. A couple of my favorite ways to fly tiny whoop are flying through the canopy of a tree is a really special experience to me. But even more than that, flying through a crowd of people, weaving through a moving sea of ankles, or chasing kids, or chasing dogs or cats or animals, or, for those applications, which are probably my absolute favorite, I'm going to lean towards brushed. I don't really want to fly brushless when I'm anywhere near a kid. If I'm, it's probably completely safe. I mean, these brushless motors are 603s. They're tiny. They're smaller than brushless. They're smaller than brushed. These are brushless, smaller than brushed, and but they bite a little harder. And if one of them, gets stuck against your skin, it'll sting. It's not going to break your skin, probably. I mean, I think that's happened 1 or 2 times in my whole career. But it's going to feel like a little bee sting, and I don't ever want to give a kid that impression of FPV or drones at all. So yeah, if I'm flying around kids or indoors among a sea of people, like I say, this moving ankle is my favorite environment, I think. And that's where you want the throttle resolution, but also the lightness of brushed motors. Yep. When you have a lower throttle resolution, you really can't control your altitude, because around people, it's kind of important to stay either below knee level or a few feet above head level. There's sort of a no-fly zone anywhere near the torso and head altitude.
Yeah, you don't want them getting stuck in the beard, because not that I'm speaking from experience or anything. Oh wait, yes I am.
So yeah, one of the things I'm proud to offer the community is a line of fashionable hairnets, including a beard net. For those bearded listeners right now, if you're ever worried about a tiny whoop getting stuck in your beard, we have a very fashionable beard net to protect your beard.
Something I feel compelled to mention, because I'm sure I'll probably get an email or two from a listener that is concerned about, why are you flying these around people, and why are you, that's not safe. This will speak to what I want to kind of move to in just a minute, about how accessible these things are and how great they are for the novice pilot. They are really incredibly safe, and because the fans are ducted, there's almost no way to get hurt in any way by these things. I mean, we're talking about something
Yeah.
that weighs 20 grams. You could throw it at a wall. It won't even break because there's not enough mass there to break it. What is it about the Tiny Whoop, in your opinion, that makes it such a great starter drone for people? Because when I get asked this all the time, how I want to get started in FPV, or I want to get started in flying drones of any kind.
Mm-hmm.
I pointed a Tiny Whoop and say that's where you start.
Yeah.
Why do you think that it's such a great tool for that?
Well, the number one reason it's such a great tool for that is because of the fun factor. Compared to, first of all, mini quads are really, really fun. Like, that is the Superman experience. But the fun compared to work factor of a Tiny Whoop is really important. But safety is a big one. And I spend a lot of time talking to people about safety. I have gotten permission to fly a Tiny Whoop in places you would never imagine, among crowds of people, celebrities. I once did a yoga class, and first of all, if you're looking for permission to fly a Tiny Whoop, or you want to fly around someone who's not sure about drones, the first thing you do is let them see this thing in your hand. Don't say drone. First thing you do is put a big smile on your face and hold this, and they will say, "What is that?" 100% of the time, nobody's going to say, "Whoa, no drones." You just don't say drone first. And then, I also once was lucky to fly in a yoga class during around a bunch of yoga poses in a big yoga class. And the instructor asked me, I got a little screen out and I let everybody in the class huddle around beforehand and look at the screen. And then I sat down and flew around behind their legs and just hit every one of them in the leg, going fast. Not just a tap, but bam, into the back of their legs. And it was hilarious. And they all laughed at it because it doesn't hurt, it just bounces off and keeps going. And that's a really salient way to prove to people that it doesn't work out. In fact, when I was working with the Drone Racing League and hosting a big Tiny Whoop event in Las Vegas in the Luxor, there was some concern about safety. And the safety officer for the building and the venue were telling me that it might not happen. And my solution was to jump in the goggles and just run into them with the Tiny Whoop and showed them that this can't hurt you. This can't hurt the people in the crowd. And everybody in this crowd is a big fan of these aircraft. So let's fly them around. And they were, after that, they said, yeah, let's do it. It's no problem, which it was no problem, of course.
It's really interesting you say that because I think you're familiar with Dylan Carpenter, who's one of my coworkers here at the AMA. He and I are kind of the drone. We'll call ourselves the drone guys at the AMA. Whenever there's a drone related activity that needs done, whether it be a demo or they just need somebody that has some expertise around the topic, they come to talk to one of us. And one of the things that we do for when we hold demos for people is we do exactly that. I tell Dylan, full speed, hit me right in the chest.
Yeah.
Yeah. And people watching like, oh, okay.
Oh, it's really just fine.
Right. Exactly. So it's always interesting to see that reaction from them. So,
yeah.
So one of the other things that I think is a really valuable tool for brand new pilots is having access to a community. And I'd be remiss if we don't mention the Facebook group on for the Tiny Whoop micro pilots of the world, and how it's kind of blossomed into this gigantic community of like-minded individuals and pilots that are incredibly helpful. Did you ever imagine it kind of growing to the size that it's grown to at this point?
Not at all. When Tiny Whoop started, the place to go online was a Facebook group called Mini Quad Club, run by my friend Nick. It's still around. And I think at the time it was something like 7 or maybe 10,000 people. I remember later looking at it, it was 15,000, just thinking, I can't believe there's that many pilots in this group that we can all engage with and ask questions to. Incredible. When Tiny Whoop started to take off, it became pretty clear early on that it was a freight train that was run away. I'm still seen as a representative. I stand proud to represent the Tiny Whoop community when I get the chance. But the truth is, everybody knows it's a freight train that's run away and nobody's behind the wheel. Certainly not me. And I'm proud to still do as much innovating as I can, but the community took it and ran faster than I could ever, no single person could ever run. And when that happened, the Facebook group started to grow and grow and grow. And until recently, it was the largest FPV Facebook group on planet Earth. Right now, it's neck and neck with Rotor Riot, the Mini Quad Club. But the Mini Quad sort of focused club, they do all kinds of FPV. I don't want to limit them at all. I love Rotor Riot and that group. But the level of innovation that comes out of this gigantic 33,000 person Facebook group is staggering, and it scrolls fast. And you might miss really important pieces of innovation for a while. Hey, there's the link right there. Anyway, if you have a question about getting into FPV or Tiny Whoop or anything, the Facebook group, it's almost like there's 33,000 people pounding the refresh button so they can be the first person to answer you.
That's true.
Like, they want to help. And like, part of the culture is sort of this each one teach one attitude that we sort of inherited from Flight Test. And it's so strong in the Tiny Whoop community because everybody in FPV, you know this, everybody has a mentor. Like, there was somebody that taught you how to build and how to tune and how to get going in FPV. And that inspires you to be that for another person. It's a very natural process. You don't have to lift yourself up. You don't have to think of yourself as a do-gooder. It just sort of naturally happens that people involved who were taught to do FPV stuff are happy to help the next guy, because flight is amazing. It's contagious and it's addictive. And it makes people proud to teach the next guy. And that's what the community is known for now.
Absolutely. And for folks listening, if you want to go check out that Facebook group, it's facebook.com/groups/tinywhoop. It's super easy to remember. We'll put that in the episode description as well. I encourage you guys to go check out that group because it's just incredibly helpful. Jesse, a couple of years ago, you teamed up with the creators of Rotor Rush, which is a UK-based simulator, to bring micros to what I would consider a legitimate simulator platform. That's something we had not seen yet. And I think that worked really, really well. But just a few weeks ago, you did something, kind of stepped it up just a little bit. You launched Tiny Whoop Go. I'd love it if you tell our listeners a little bit about Tiny Whoop Go.
Yeah. So first of all, I got to mention the Tiny Whoop Club Network, which is a network of Tiny Whoop clubs around the world now. Started in the UK. Now it's in the United States. And if you go to tinywhoopclubnetwork.com, a map will pop up showing you a whole bunch of Tiny Whoop clubs around the world, mostly USA and UK right now. But these are all clubs that have an open door policy, meaning that they invite anybody to come and check out flight. And it's really cool to see this map grow and look at these profiles and see the way a group of people in different parts of the world are sort of having fun with Tiny Whoop. A big part of the Tiny Whoop Club Network project was Tiny Whoop Go, which stands for Tiny Whoop Games Online. It's the simulator that is the evolution of the Rotor Rush Tiny Whoop platform. And the big change that we've added is, first of all, we made it free for anybody to download. Right now, you can anybody who wants to can fly for free on the simulator. Yeah, and the way to get there is to go to the club network and sign up to be a member of the Tiny Whoop Club Network, and we will immediately send you a download link and an activation code. So anybody who wants to can fly for free, and the courses on it, because we also created a track builder, and we gave the track builder for free to every Tiny Whoop race organizer that signs up. So anybody in the United States or anywhere who wants to be a track builder, if you're a Tiny Whoop club organizer, you get a free track builder. And that means that we now have the ability to have these guys, these Tiny Whoop club organizers, can get on the sim, Tiny Whoop Go, build a track, and host events for their clubs during the pandemic without ever meeting up if they want. And all of this is done without anybody spending any money at all. There's just $0 spent. Your entire club gets a free sim. You get a free track builder, and you get to build as many tracks as you want for your clubs to practice on. Not just that. Your club members get access to your tracks, but they get access to every other track that every other Tiny Whoop race organizer has ever built on Tiny Whoop Go. And it's getting big. There's a bunch of race organizers building tracks now. I just released a couple more tracks. And it's really cool to have this tool. I feel really lucky to be a part of the Rotor Rush project, to be a part of the Tiny Whip Go project, and to be able to offer this tool totally free to the entire Tiny Whip community, to have events and really just keep the Tiny Whip community cohesive and strong during the pandemic, and continue to, one of the things I'm most passionate about, and the thing that really still brings meaning to the Tiny Whip movement for me, is my relationships. And you kind of know that the best part of this whole thing, the gift of flight, is unbelievably miraculous. And the way it makes me feel is important to me in a deep way. But way more than that are the relationships and the friendships that have come from flight, and sharing the air with someone, or having a great time at an event or in a drone house, or, this is a piece of culture that we totally stole from Flight Test, who's been developing it for years. That the main benefit to this entire enterprise is the friends that you're going to make and the family that's created when you're getting together to build and fly. I credit Josh Bixler and the team at Flight Test with creating that culture and letting it inspire what became the strongest part of Tiny Whip culture. So keeping that socializing alive during the pandemic is something that I'm really passionate about. And I personally spend time on a video chat or an audio chat with a group of friends and Tiny Whip pilots and people like that. I do that every single night because I kind of need it. I need to, I live alone. When I'm isolated, there was a time when I was isolated from my family because my sister's pregnant and my parents are over 65, they're high risk. And I didn't want to, I was just nervous like everybody was. And now we understand more about it. But at the time, I really wanted to be super careful. And I started to realize that socializing and talking with people and being with people is even more important than I thought. And that's what led us to pump out Tiny Whip Go. And, it's sort of an early release. This was, when we released it, it wasn't a polished product. It still isn't. It's not the perfect simulator for anybody, but it was something that we were able to get out quickly, release it to the entire community for free. And, coupled with a Discord chat, if you're doing voice chat and flying together, it feels like you're hanging out. It feels like you're wearing goggles, and you're sitting next to somebody who's also wearing goggles. There's really no missing parts left. So that's what the project was all about for me. And it also sort of became the entire meaning of the Tiny Whip Club Network project, which is going a whole bunch of other directions too. But keeping the social interaction alive and keeping the community tight and maintaining the amount of new friendships that are still coming out of the community is the most important part of the whole thing.
Yeah, for sure. And it's been so refreshing to have something like Tiny Whip Go be a destination that we can go to. And like you said, it's like hanging out with your buddies flying like you normally would under any normal circumstance. But where we can't do that now, we have this other option to go to. And not only is it another option, it's a free option. And that's something that you just don't really see anymore. And personally, I want to thank you for doing that, because it's been very helpful for me as someone who also is a single guy living alone, and having family members that are high risk. It's like, I spend a lot of time sitting on my couch, not really able to go out and do much, but I've been able to have that there, and I've spent a lot of hours, whether it be with you and your guys on the sim, or whether it's one of my local Tiny Whip groups getting together to fly on Monday nights. Like, we have a lot of fun with that, and that's just a really cool tool. I completely agree. A lot of people used to say, "What's the best way to get into FPV?" Probably Tiny Whip. And then I'd always say, well, before you get into Tiny Whip, you should get a simulator. You should be on a simulator before. It's hard to destroy a Tiny Whip. You can crash a Tiny Whip all day. It's probably going to be fine nowadays. In the early days, you'd probably break props, probably break a camera back then, definitely break some antennas. But nowadays, it's a pretty solid recipe. Like, this thing is a basher, even though it's high performance. You don't have to really balance those two anymore. And
Oh, I just lost my train of thought getting stuck about, I say basher, and I just started to think of these recent times when I was really testing durability, What was I saying, Matt?
Well, just about how it's been such a great way to stay connected with people and having these online groups and get-togethers on a weekly basis.
It's true. And I'm doing, I fly at least 3 nights a week on the sim and hang out with people. And I've got an open Discord if anybody wants to chill out and do a little flying or not, or just pop in and chat. I'm always good for that. Like I say, it's something that I need. I think everybody needs it. I think coming out of this pandemic, people aren't going to take, I certainly am not going to take my social life for granted ever again. And my social life happens because Tiny Whip is something that happened to me. My social life has a lot to do with it. And I'm so proud to get as much of it as I do in spite of the pandemic and social isolation.
Well, and in spite of those, I want to touch briefly just on some of the big events that you hold. You have a yearly invitational that you hold out in Colorado where you invite a bunch of guys to come. And, it looks like a big party, frankly, but you guys do a lot of racing and a lot of flying and you live stream it. And it's just been a blast to watch. I assume once, obviously, things get back to normal, that's something that you want to continue doing.
Oh yeah, the Invitational is one of my favorite. It's probably my second favorite. Well, okay, second or third favorite event of the year. Okay,
now you got to rank them all. That's dangerous.
All right, I'm down to rank. I'll give you my top 3. That's what I've committed to so far. Invitational is 2 or 3. It's a really special event. It's an exclusive event. Because Tiny Whip headquarters is in a commercial building that I share with other people. And we have things like fire code. I just can't have more than 40 people. And every time I host an invitational, which has been 3 or 4 times, depending on what you count, I have to turn down a bunch of friends that I really care about. And I hate that feeling. Not to mention tons of people I haven't been lucky enough to meet from the community who obviously deserve to come and fly an epic LED course, which is sort of what it's all about. In the early days, it was all, the first invitational was hundreds of Tiny Whip gates making a snake of a course, literally hundreds that went everywhere. It was a hard course to fly. Ever since then, it's been morphing more and more. Tiny Whip culture has really adopted this sort of circusy LED vibe that is now become a really important and central part of our culture. And the Tiny Whip Invitational is important to me, but it's not the most important race. The most important race is definitely the Tiny Whip International Open at the Multi GP International Open, right there in your backyard at the AMA headquarters, where I've been lucky enough to host 3 of these events. And, it's an incredible turnout of Tiny Whip skill. It's the highest, it's the peak of Tiny Whip skill in the world. But it's also an event that already has 300 people at it that are passionate about FPV and passionate about the gift of flight. And we're meeting literally at the AMA headquarters, one of the hinterlands of all model aviation, obviously. It's pretty much like a pilgrimage that we take to the AMA headquarters, and we all compete and we all fellowship like crazy, and we have a great time. And we have, a get together under the Tiny Whip tent, under all those rainbow colored lights. And it's the most fun. I mean, I don't have to tell you, you were there. It was a legendary event last year. And so far, every year it's gotten bigger than the year before, but most recently it was just a legendary event. And, now I have to talk about this year because I'm trying so hard to work out this year. And I know that, here's what I'm nervous about. All right. Maybe you can tell me, Muncie's got some bad press lately with regard to the pandemic. That's at least, I think that the numbers are twisted a little bit, but Muncie, was noted as a place that had more cases, a higher growth of cases. But then I also read that it's got far fewer cases and is a kind of place that if you just add a couple cases, it's got a high growth,
From a percentage perspective, we're making some lists that are making the rounds. But for the raw numbers aren't quite as bad, but it's
Yeah. And
listen,
you got
I'm no
to, when you're
doctor.
on lists like that, you're talking about media hype. So I don't read into it too much. The thing in my position, like I say, because I'm really close with my family, and after I went through a quarantine process, I'm now hanging out with them, but not crossing paths with anybody else that works at Tiny Whoop. And I'm still have to be careful because, like I say, I have a pregnant sister and some other family members that I just have to be extra careful,
Yep.
even though we know a lot more about it now. And if I'm able to pull that off, and I'm still really hoping to, it just probably means another long period of isolation and quarantine when I get back. Even though, like I say, we know a lot more about it now. So yeah, I'm trying really hard to work it out that we can pull off another really fun party. Not a party, but event. We do both. I mean, we have a
It
lot
is a
of fun.
party. I mean, at the end of the day, it is kind of like a day's fun.
It's a social thing. It's a social experience for sure. And
absolutely.
That's sort of what like I say, we're trying to use Tiny Whoop to encourage the real meaning of this whole thing, which is the social experience. So like I say, we stole that from Flight Test. And speaking of Flight Test, that's the other event that I'm going to put it on my top 3. Flight Fest is like one of my favorites. So fun. So just to fill out my top 3, Flight Fest, which is also canceled, or which is canceled this year, is an incredible event that I think everybody should go to.
I agree. Flight Fest has been. I've been to it twice now, I think, and both times I had an absolute blast. They put on just a great show there. And yeah, it's been canceled this year, and the International Open has been moved. Boy, I don't have the date in front of me. It's in August, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's still up in the air on whether or not that's going to be good with what Indiana is going through and whatnot.
Yep.
So
we're going to learn. No matter what you pick, no matter what date you pick, we're going to learn a lot more. Everything's still changing fast,
But I think the important thing to point out, though, is that no matter what happens, whether IO happens or whether it gets moved to next year, and like Flight Fest was, it's whenever it happens, it's gonna be a good one. We're gonna make sure that it's gonna be a blast and it's gonna be safe first and foremost, but that it's gonna be a blast and everybody's gonna have a great time, much like they've had every other year that they've been there.
We will all be together again.
Yes, hopefully without as many mosquitoes this time.
Yeah, man. There was a few mosquitoes last year, but it wasn't anything. It wasn't that bad. If you're a mosquito hater, you would still choose them. You would still choose to go. It's not awful. Okay. I've been in a lot worse mosquitoes.
I agree. Well, Jesse, where does Tiny Whoop go next? What's on the horizon for you as far as Tiny Whoop is concerned?
My favorite part of the work I'm doing right now is still building the Tiny Whoop Club network, and encouraging the community in that way. When we first launched the Tiny Whoop Club network in the United Kingdom, it was awesome to see all of the I think there's between 15 and 20 now Tiny Whoop clubs in the United Kingdom, and when those clubs all became aware of each other and entered a Facebook chat together and started to talk about building a club network, a bunch of benefits came out of that I never saw coming, that I didn't predict. And like events, like joint events, like competitions, like idea sharing, course design is a major talking point that, it's something that we've spent a lot of time thinking about, but it's like flight. Nobody taught you to do it. You kind of developed your own style on your own. And that means that when you have a network of sharing minds, you get a lot out of it because you've got these totally different flavors of things like course building, or how to manage an event, or how to wrangle all your pilots, or how to treat video issues, or how to treat, all kinds of things that can come up that are kind of rare, but everybody's kind of had to deal with on their own. There's tons of benefit coming out of the Tiny Whoop Club network that I didn't see coming, because now there's this sort of network uniting a bunch of clubs. And whenever I can talk about the Tiny Whoop Club network in the United States, I have to mention that we don't know the best part that will come out of it. And it's got this purpose to serve the Tiny Whoop community and help them in a very general way But we know that a lot of the ways it's going to help the different club members and the different clubs themselves that become a part of the network, we don't know that yet. And we want to know what that is. And getting to talk to organizers all over the country and the world has been really insightful and really encouraging to me, and has brought a lot of positivity and smiles to my world. And it makes me really excited to think of what it can do for all of these thousands and thousands of tiny whoop pilots around the world. So that's really what I am most excited about right now. There are technology innovations happening all the time. There are big changes happening to the components of this thing that I probably can't talk about yet, but that I'm really excited about. And we're going to see some new stuff come to the market and become a part of our culture that, it's so fun. But yeah, what I'm most excited about in looking at the future of the movement of tiny whoop and tiny whoop culture is what's coming out of this aggregation of clubs through the club network, and the interaction between club members and club organizers between each other has been pretty awesome and full of surprises. So that's what I really see as a big part of, that's what I'm working really hard on. And it's a big part of the future of tiny whoop culture.
Jesse, I hope you realize how big of an impact you have made on this hobby. I really do, because you've turned this into now a global phenomenon, but it's more than just the product, as you're talking about. It's that culture, and it's one of the most inspirational things. It never fails. If I'm having a bad day, I can turn on a flight video from Jesse P, and smile comes on my face, because it's that culture that's baked into everything that goes into tiny whoop culture. It's baked in, and I really appreciate everything you've done for this hobby. I don't think it can be underestimated.
That's really nice. It can be overstated, because, like I say, tiny whoop, that's really nice. And I don't know how to say thank you, and I'm not good at compliments, but tiny whoop is a community project. And I'm sitting here as sometimes the figurehead, but it's a huge movement that I am not driving the ship, and I'm not responsible. And when you say that, it's my instinct is to say, look at what the community has done. Look at the people that were a part of the project from the very beginning. Even in the very beginning, there was no appropriate time to give me credit. It's just the truth. I would like to take credit for everything that's happened. It's just not appropriate. I do not have that right. Nobody does. We have a gigantic community that was encouraged and brought together by Flight Test, by Multi-GP, by the AMA, and the family of people who have built it. And a lot of the people who came into this with different intentions, like people who are just trying to make that cash, or people who had political or whatever other agendas, they're not really around. They didn't last. The people that are still around, I feel like are the right people who have worked on the entire FPV project and the entire model aviation project, looking at Flight Test and the AMA, huge influences on our culture. And, I don't get credit for any of that, or for any, I put some fun music and showed off some really fun flights and like started to kick this thing in the butt a little bit, but that was a long time ago.
I agree with you, but you are an example, and it's your personality that comes through the culture, and your response to that is exactly why I think you are the perfect person to be kind of the spokesman for.
Anybody would say that. Anybody who's not a coward would say that, for sure. That's what I'm saying. I'm not being overly humble. People that are in touch with the history of tiny whoop and of FPV, that. that it's a thing way bigger than one person. But thank you very much. That's all I should have said. Thank you.
Absolutely. Jesse, where can folks go to find out more about Tiny Whoop?
Best place is the Facebook group you mentioned. It's 33,000 people who love to fly Tiny Whoop, and you can get all the information without worrying if it's biased. You can get it straight from the community. I own tinywhoop.com and I sell some parts there. We're actually out of stock on some stuff right now, but that doesn't matter because you can get stuff from all kinds of different wonderful people. And the place to ask for advice is probably the community itself, which is the Facebook group, Tiny Whoop Micro FPV Pilots of the World. Another great place to get a feel for what the community is now tinywhoopclubnetwork.com, which is a big map of clubs around the world that is really fun to look at. And anytime you see a little icon on the map, you can click it and look at some photos from their posse and see what kind of aircraft they're flying, see what their courses look like. It's really fun to kind of get a taste of different Tiny Whoop flavors around the world. That's a good place to go.
Well, Jesse, I said this to you before we started. I cannot thank you enough for coming on the AMA podcast. I've told you before, I think your story is amazing. I think what you've done is amazing. What this community has done is amazing. And I really appreciate you coming on to tell that story.
It's my pleasure. I'd love to come back anytime. I'm sorry I didn't make it on your show sooner.
You are welcome back anytime you want. You just say the word. You got something to talk about. Let's do it.
I'll be back.
All right. And I want to thank all of you guys out there for listening this week to the AMA podcast. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd love it if you do so. We're on all the major podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, etc. And of course, you can listen right from your browser at modelaircraft.org/podcast. We release brand new episodes every single Monday, so subscribe so you don't miss a single one. And hey, if you listen through Apple Podcasts, give us a like, rate us there. That'll help us move up into their rankings and hopefully get exposed to as many people as possible. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for us, drop us an email at podcast@modelaircraft.org. I get those right in my email inbox. I read every single one, so be sure to keep those coming. And of course, if you're not already a member of the AMA, head over to modelaircraft.org and see what the AMA can do for you. We'd love to see you out at one of the flying fields very, very soon. And if you are already a member of the AMA, thank you so much for your support. And with that, for everybody here at the AMA, thank you so much for listening. We hope you'll be back right here next week on the AMA podcast.